Good afternoon. This is Jeff Nanowski from David Corp, and we're going to be starting our webinar on NAVRISK Vision User Desktop Personalization and Configuration in about 2 minutes. We're going to give everybody just a little more time to join in. So. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, this is a webinar, one of our series of webinars that we'll be doing throughout the year. This one will be covering, as you can see on the title slide here, NAVRISK Vision User Desktop Personalization, and as well as some user configuration capabilities. So we'll talk both on what you as an end user can configure in the system, and then we'll also touch on what are some global settings that the administrator can do on your behalf as well. I'm Jeff Nanowski. I'm the Product Solutions Manager for David Corporation. And also joining me today is Andy Abella. He's our support manager. And just a couple of items from a housekeeping perspective. This webinar is being recorded. So if you do have someone within your organization that couldn't attend and would like to hear this, again, we'll direct you to the website where this information will be placed. And you can reach out to Andy on that, and he will be more than happy to get you squared away for listening to this again. The other thing is that we do have a questions panel in the GoToMeeting, so you should see that as part of the little display panel over on your screen when you join the meeting. So if you do have any questions, this will be in listen-only mode, so you won't be able to interject, but you can use the question feature in the area there and just type in the question, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar and try to answer those for you as we go along. All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to go to the next slide here. So today's discussion will focus on these items that you see here highlighted on the slide. We'll talk a little bit about some of the home page options that you have within the product, some of the search controls, and some of the features and functions in there, the different calendars that are available in the system, and what information you can display on those as an end user. Some areas here which we refer to as grid controls, and we'll talk about those in a little more detail as we go through this. More from the administrator perspective, kind of the lower line here, the upper line there, if you think about it, that's really more from the user itself. That's the things that they can control. The things on the second row there, field resource allows you to add additional fields. It allows you to configure the fields on the screen, and we'll talk about some of those options as we go through this. The claim footer. Additional fields, which is the ability to add in unique user-defined fields and report category configuration. So those are more on the administrative side. So we'll kind of split this discussion up, and I'll make a point of clarifying what settings are at the user's control and what settings would be more at an administrator level. And finally, that last item on there, compact layout view, that's a new feature that's available in the newest release of NAVRISK Vision, which is called 2.0. And that was announced today of availability. If you're interested in looking at that new version and looking at upgrading to that new version, you can reach out to Andy, and he'll be more than happy to talk with you about that. So I just want to make a mention that we will not be showing that function. I'll talk about what it is when we get to it, but that is a new feature based on this discussion that we're having today. So the next slide here is just basically just an overview of how the system, when we built the system, how we try to make it highly configurable so that both the end user experience can be controlled, as well as administratively, globally, how the system will work through that. So this is just kind of a grid that shows some of the features and functions from a configurability perspective. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we're only going to have time in this 45 minutes to an hour to just go through some of those high-level items that we mentioned earlier. But nonetheless, these are just at a high level, all of the configuration options that are available from a security perspective, all the way through reporting. The upper quadrant there that you see in the upper right-hand corner, those are all of the user configurable. Some of those are user configurable, some of those are global as well as the table maintenance areas and the organizational hierarchy, et cetera, which we will not be talking about during this webinar. So that's basically the plan of attack here for this afternoon that we'll be talking about from a topic perspective. Before we get into the demonstration, I wanted to turn it over to Andy to talk to you about a new program that we have rolled out from an account management perspective. And Andy will give you just some basic information on that, as well as a couple other points before we go ahead and start the demonstration. So Andy?
Thank you, Jeff. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to take a quick minute or two to talk to you about our new 2018 support initiative that we call the Designated Account Resource, or DART team. Go ahead, next slide, Jeff. The Designated Account Resource Team is our new proactive client support model, where our team will work with you, not only working on your support issues, but will also be working with you on an account level. Our focus with you will include managing your account development, where you are able to build a relationship with your DART team members. They will focus on understanding your utilization of the vision system and the data that you use to meet your daily KPIs and your overall goals. The team will work with you to promote a more face-to-face and executive-driven account resource management system to assist you in making the most of your NAVRISK system. Next slide.
Oops, sorry about that. So let me try again. There we go.
And the model is basically set up with, we have team member roles. Of course, the account manager will be overseeing your full account. They'll be the person that you contact for overall account needs, CRs, issues. You will also have a designated support tech who will assist you with your triage of your any tickets that you put in on the system and the day-to-day support activities. You will have a product or development lead, who will work with you on any any more extensive support or development issues, and basically be the point person for development work. Reporting lead, which like the development lead, is a person who will assist you with your reporting needs. As if you have reporting issues, the issues that are escalated will go to them, and they will basically oversee any reporting work you might need. For larger projects, you will have a specific project manager who will, again, be familiar with your system and be able to help guide you with any more extensive work that you need to be done, and a QA tech for looking over, finalizing any development upgrades or changes that are made to make sure that your system runs as smoothly as possible. Next slide. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, we've had many questions about this, so I wanted to make sure there should have been an email put out in the last week or two, but just to make sure you're all aware, We have our 2018 user conference coming up. That will be September 26th and 27th. It's for all clients. We're asking both users and executive levels. If you want to show up, please do. We have a lot of new and interesting items we'd like to go over with you. As you can see, September 26th is the pre-conference with a half-a-day training event. There'll be a cocktail event and a dinner following that. And September 27th is the one-day user conference that will be full of all sorts of new information about the vision system we're working on. It's free to all clients if you can book it by June 1st. And if you need any more information, feel free to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to assist you in getting it booked for you and whoever of your staff you feel you need to go to the event. And with that, I believe I'm going to send it back to Jeff, and he'll take you through the demonstration today. Jeff?
All right, great. Thanks, Andy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let me share my screen here, and we'll start going through the application. So what we're going to do is for the next 45 minutes or so is just go through and talk about some of the different features. We're going to start, as I mentioned before, with features that are available at the user level. These would be things that you would not have to go to your system administrator to do, but rather these are things that are under your control as far as the way that you interact with the application. So the first item here we'll talk about is your home screen. Many of you have seen this screen that's being displayed right now, which is what we call our launch pad. That's made up of several different tiles that you can see here, and we'll talk about that in a second. The other screen that you may be accustomed to is the diary screen, or what we call the My Task screen. So many of you, if you have upgraded, this would be the first screen that would display when you first log in, unless you've made a change, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. So this is with NAVRISK Vision, this is the standard start screen, which is very similar to those of you that are upgrading from the 5.8 or the 5 series of NAVRISK, as well as from the Renaissance product platform. So this acts as your diary screen. What we've done is we said that we don't necessarily want you to have to see the diary screen when you first log in. I always joke that maybe you want to have a cup of coffee before you actually have to look at the screen and see all the past due items that you have in your diary. So with that, you also have another choice as far as what your home screen can be, and that one choice that you have is this screen right here, which is the launch pad. The benefit of this is that it gives you as the user the ability to control with one-click access what information you can get to, and also what things that are important to you, because based on the way you do business, you do things within the system may be different from a colleague that sits next to you, as an example. So let's talk a little bit about what this screen can do for you. So the first thing is it gives you the ability to configure what displays as far as these tiles on the screen. So as an example here, I don't worry about the policy back office. I don't use that personally as a user. So this yellow tile here really means nothing to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right-click on that tile, and I can click Remove this tile, and that will take that off of my launch pad. So therefore, I have some extra space to put some other things that may be more important to me. So I have the ability to take any tile that I don't use, and I can remove it just by right-clicking on it and selecting Remove this tile. I also can go ahead and move tiles around. So for instance, if the diary tile that you see here, this is the one that has the date on it, that's a quick link to my diary task. If I want to move that maybe over into the upper right-hand corner, I can do that very easily. I can also change the size of some of these tiles. So maybe I am in the process, or part of my role is to create new claims. So this tile here is important to me. I can go ahead and make that either small, medium, which in landscape or portrait, or large. If I make it large, obviously it takes over a significant part of my screen there. So I have the ability to change the size of those tiles as well. And I can also move them, as I mentioned before, which I moved the diary tile up to the top. And again, I have the ability to remove tiles. So all of that is under my control as an end user. I can go ahead and do that. Now, what I tell people is if you've had a bad day and you're moving things around and you don't like how it looks and you say, I wish I could start from scratch, There is a way to do that just by right-clicking on any tile, and there's a menu option that says Reset Design. And what that does is it puts everything back to the way it looked out of the box. So it's always a way to get back to the way the tiles looked when the system was first installed. The other thing that you can do in here, which I think is a nice feature, is that you'll see a button at the bottom here that says Add Custom Tile. So not only can you manipulate the tiles that you see that we've implemented here for you, but you can also add your own tiles. So as an example, let's say that I handle workers' comp claims for the state of California, and I want to be able to go to the Department of Work Comp website for the state, because maybe I go out there once a week to look at some new information or what have you. So I would like to have a tile on here that allows me to do that without having to open up another browser window, go to my favorites, and select that, or type in www.dwc or whatever the login is for that particular site. So what I can do is I can use this Add Custom Tile at the bottom here, and this allows me to go in and add my own tile. The first thing you need to do is put a caption on the tile. So I'm going to call this the California Department of Work Comp. And because I want to make sure I can see it, because my eyes are going bad here, I want to make sure that I change the font size from 12 to something maybe like 28. Let's make it 30, which is about the size of these tiles that you see here. I'm going to link this to a URL, and I'm going to type the URL in there. So this is where the URL for the state goes. A couple things to mention on this is that do not include when you're doing this, do not include the HTTP. Just use the www. There are certain websites that don't play nice with this tool, specifically ones that have a secured, like an HTTPS type of a setting. Some of those do not work. So you'll have to kind of use your trial and error here. Some websites, being that they're secure, do not play well within this tile functionality. This particular one does, because I've used it in the past before. The next thing you need to do is you need to pick either an image, like if you want to have like a flower or something as your background, or you can click background color, and that gives you the whole color wheel here that you can pick and choose the color that you want. So I'm going to go ahead and pick blue, but make sure you pick something dark, because the lettering for the caption that you've typed in here is going to be in white. So if you pick a really light colored tile, it's going to be like looking at a snowstorm. You're not going to be able to see the information. So just make sure that you pick a dark color when you're doing this. Then what you'll do is you'll just go ahead and click Save, and you'll see here on the screen that it put in my tile. Now, what I probably would have to do here is change the font to a smaller type, because there's not enough space here. Or I'd have to make this a little larger, maybe make it medium, and you'll see now that tile has been added. So now what's nice is that when I click on this tile, what it's going to do is it's going to open up another web page in my browser here and take me right to that particular site. So you can see that this would be useful for users maybe at the adjuster level who go to different sites. If you have a TPA and you want to link that site, you can do that, and that's all done through this Add Custom Tile at the bottom here. So once you have all of this set up and it looks pretty and it's exactly the way that you want it, you've got to remember one last step, and that is you have to save what you have here. Because if you've gone through all this and made all these beautiful changes and you've moved things around and created your own custom tiles, and you forget to do this last step when you log back in later on today or tomorrow, it all goes back to the way it was before. So what you have to make sure you do as the final step is anywhere on any tile, it doesn't matter which one you select, just right click, and then you have to say Save Current Design. And that will actually save, and it gives you a thumbs up, will save that design that you set up. So the next time you log in, this screen will appear for you if you've chosen this screen for that function. Okay, so again, this is just a nice way of being able to use the system and make it your own from a starting Launchpad perspective. Now, one other thing that you'll need to do if you want this screen to be your home screen when you log in, because remember I told you before, when you first upgrade, the screen that's going to appear every time, unless you change it, will be the diary screen. If you want the diary screen, just leave everything alone and life will be good. If you want this Launchpad as your home screen, or let's say you're one of the, like a manager, and you're looking at some of these dashboards that come standard with the system, and you would like one of these dashboards to display as your home page when you log in. You have the ability to select which dashboard or which function you want as your home page. So what I want to do is I want to set the Launchpad as my home page. So I'm going to go up here underneath my username at the top, and I'm going to click on User Settings. And this is going to give me the ability here to specify Do I want one of the dashboards? Do I want the launch pad, or do I want this one that's called dashboard? That's actually the diaries. So if you want that, you'll select dashboard, or you'll select launch pad, or whatever you want, and then you'll go ahead and you'll click the save icon up here. The next time again that you log in, that will then be your default screen as your home page. So while we're in this user settings area, let's kind of transition into some of the other things that can be done in this user settings area. So again, that's underneath your username at the top, under user settings. So the first thing we've already talked about, and that is, what's your start page? So if you want that launch pad, those tiles we just set up there, you'll simply click the drop down here, select launch pad, and then click save, and then that will be your default home page or your start page. One of the other areas that you have to work with in here is where it says toolbar color. You'll notice at the top here where I have my toolbars, there's a black background, and the tools themselves, or the icons, are in white, and that's the default. If you are creative and you want to change the color of those icons, you can click the toolbar color, and it gives you all sorts of different wonderfully named colors that you can pick and choose from. I happen to be a fan of tomato. I don't know why. One of my users that I was working with loved the tomato color. I don't know. But anyways, you can go ahead and click tomato or any other color that you want. Click save, and then that new color scheme will appear here on your toolbar. So you have to always remember to click save in order to see the change. You can't just pick the color from the drop down and expect it to show. You have to save it first in order to see what that looks like. So again, it gives you the ability to personalize the color scheme of those icons. The other option on here is this one here where it says claim detail page option. When you go into a claim record in the system, I go into the detail screen here, by default, it automatically opens up that screen with the claim function at the top here expanded. If you would prefer, when you go into the claim detail, to have everything collapsed, so all of these sections collapsed, you can do that in the system. If you'd also, on the other hand, if you'd prefer to have all of these expanded, you have the ability to select that as an option too. So that control is what we're referring to here in the user settings again, and that's this option right here where it says claim detail page option. These are the three items that you have in this drop-down list, which I'll tell you what's in here. The first one says expand claim detail panel. That's the default setting. The next one is expand all detail info panels. In other words, everything when you open up claim detail on any claim, all of those will be expanded, all those sections. And the last one is collapse all claim detail panels. So whichever one you select, and then you go ahead and click save, I'm going to click the collapse all detail panels there. So now when I go back into a detail record of a claim, you'll notice that instead of having that first section expanded and everything collapsed, everything now is collapsed. So it just makes it a little bit easier, especially on a work comp claim that has a lot of different sections here. That makes it a nice way to be able to look at that information. So again, those are the options that you have located under user settings. You can pick your start page, you can pick your toolbar color, and you can pick whether or not you want the panels on the claim detail expanded, collapsed, or by default as they're sitting at this point. The new feature that I explained a little bit earlier in the little square that you saw in the PowerPoint, giving you the ability to change the look and feel basically of these screens, will be a new option that will be available on the screen in NAVRISK 2.0. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to take these screens that you'll see here. Let me just expand some of this information. I don't have it. I don't have the new version loaded on my demo site here, so I apologize for that. But what will happen is it basically gets rid of a lot of this extra white space that you see between the fields and between the sections. It collapses things down in such a way that it gives you a lot more space to work instead of having a lot of the white space. So it tends to push the fields together a little bit closer, just to make it a little bit easier to navigate through. So that will be a new feature that's available if and when you upgrade to NAVRISK 2.0. Okay, so that's the talking about the launch pad. The other thing I always like to point out is that a quick shortcut to get back to that launch pad, there's two ways to do that. One is you can click on the little house icon and you can go to My Tasks, which are your diaries, or Launchpad, which are the tiles. The other way to do that, if you always like to go back to Launchpad, is if you click on the NAVRISK Vision logo in the upper left-hand corner, that will take you back to that Launchpad. So it's just a quick one-button click to get back to the Launchpad just by clicking on the NAVRISK Vision logo. All right, the next item on here from a user configuration perspective relates to the search screen. So when you go in and click on the claim search screen here, you will be presented with a lot of different options, some of which may not relate to either the types of claims that you handle or the information that you typically search by, etc. So within the application, at the user level, when you're doing a search, and that will be the same whether you're doing, I'm going to click on the search button up here, a claim search, an occurrence search, a payment search, policy search, etc. All of these search screens have a little gear icon, which is located. Turn my cursor into a pen here, and if I circle this up at the top here, you'll notice there's a little gear icon at the top. If you click on that gear icon, what that does is it opens up a search setting control for you. So here is where you can go through and you can uncheck items that you don't need from a search perspective. So for instance, if I never search on, insured report number, and I don't use jurisdiction claim, or maybe I just handle liability claims and not any work comp claims. I don't use a CAT code. I don't search by insured. I don't need to search by cell phone for the claimant or by their email. These are things I would use as a search criteria. I probably am not going to search by their email address. So I can pick and choose items on this list here. And once they're unchecked, I click the Save button. And what that does then is it reduces my screen down here. And you'll notice, if you haven't already, that I'm missing now the email and I'm missing the cell phone number as a search criteria under the claimant section here. So that gives you the ability as a user to pick and choose the items that you want, that your preferences relate to as it relates to doing a search. Of course, if you decide that you want these fields back, you can just go ahead and click them all again, and then click Save, and then they magically appear again. So it gives you the ability, again, to have control over your search criteria. This has nothing to do with the results screen. This is just the criteria that you use to do a search. So if all you search on is last name and claim number, you could remove everything in here but those two fields, as an example. One thing I like to point out is that if you are using the Launchpad and you do search by just last name and claim number, you'll notice there's a shortcut tile here that allows you to do just that. So rather than opening up the full search screen, you can just use last name or claim number and click search right from this Launchpad screen. You don't even have to go into the full search screen. So that's an option for you as well. So all of the search screens in here have the little grid. Here's the payment search screen. Here's that little gear icon, and you can pick and choose the items that you want to be included in your search criteria. And again, that's at the user level. So again, you've got that flexibility when it comes to creating searches that make the most sense to you as a user. The next item on our list here relates to an area that we call grid control. So as an example, let me go in here and I want to look here at my payment screen. So I'm going to go into my detail screen here, and I'm going to go into the payments area of this particular claim. So this screen tends to be one that has a lot of information in it. If you have a claim that has hundreds of payments in here, you'll also notice that on the screen here, you'll see that there's many columns of data here. In fact, there's so much, I have this long scroll bar here at the bottom that I have to use to go all the way over to the far right-hand side here to look at information, maybe like the invoice number, that information. I also have some information on here that maybe I don't even use, like for instance, the escheatment date. Maybe I'm not doing any escheatments within the system, or the clear date. I'm not clearing any checks. I don't have that function enabled in my system. I don't use a voucher number, etc. So you'll notice I have, not only do I have a lot of fields in this grid, but I also have things that are maybe not organized the way that I want them to be. Maybe I like to have the field invoice number. Maybe I want that a little further over to the left, so I don't have to always continue to scroll like this every time I want to look at this information. So you have the ability to control that information at the end user level, and that's also done by a little gear icon. In this case, the gear icon appears in the toolbar here above the grid. So all the grids in the system, we'll talk about that in a minute, have this same gear functionality that you can click on. So if I click on the gear here, that's going to open up a screen here for me where I can determine in the grid what columns do I want in this grid. So right now, over on the right-hand side, I have every single thing selected, and that's by default. We show every single field here for you by default. But let's say there's certain things, as I mentioned before, that I don't use, that I don't want, like the sheetment date. I don't use that. I can highlight it, click the button here over on the left-hand side to remove it, and that puts it into my columns over here on the left-hand side. This is basically removing it from the user column here section on the right. I mentioned before that I don't use voucher number. I'm going to get rid of that, etc. So I can go through here and remove items that I don't want to see when I go to this payment grid here. I also have the ability to move things as well. So let's say that, as I mentioned before, that this invoice number is important to me, but I don't want this as the 8th field down here. So I can highlight it, click the up button a couple times, and that's going to move it up closer to the main section here. So it'll actually show in the main panel without having me navigate over to the right-hand side. So I have the ability to move columns up and down. I have the ability to remove them from my view, and I can also add them back in. So let's say that, oops, I fat-fingered it and I took the through date out, and I didn't mean to do that. I could highlight it, just remove it. I could highlight it, click add, and it's going to add it back in for me. Unfortunately, what it does is it adds it at the bottom. So if you do that, you'll just have to remember to make sure that you move it up so your from and through dates are together again. Once you've done all of this, you'll go ahead and click save, and that's going to then apply the change that you made, and you'll notice the column settings are going to move here. So now, if I go over here, you'll see I have my invoice number now in the first 5 columns, so it just displays here as opposed to having to slide all the way over to the right-hand side to look at it. You'll also notice that my sheetment date is gone, as is my voucher number. All right. So this is a control. It's this little gear icon that you see circled in purple here, and that allows you to go in and configure this particular grid for the payment search. Now, there's multiple grids in the system. There's a grid in the diary screen. There's a grid in the notepad screen. There's a grid in the letters screen, etc. Each grid has its own settings, its own little gear icon, and its own settings. So you can move things around. You can set each one up individually, or you can leave them out of the box, and everything will be exactly as it was when it was first installed. The other items that I wanted to showcase while I'm in this screen here are the rest of these icons here that you see in the grid. Probably the biggest one here is this drop down that says 5. By default, it's going to display 5 payment records per page. Now that might be good if you only have 5 payments made on a claim, but if you've got a claim that's been open a long time and you've got hundreds of payments, it's going to require you to do a lot of pagination to go through page by page by page. So what you can do is you can go ahead and click the drop down, and it gives you several different options. It gives me an option of 10 per page, 15, 20, 25, 50, etc. So I can select whatever number I think is appropriate. Keeping in mind when I do that, it's going to show me this screen here, and it may require me to go down. So if I've got a lot of payments in here and I've got it set to 100, I'm going to have to use my up and down arrow and scroll down the screen to see more of the information. These settings here are per screen. So my payments, maybe I want to show 15 per page maximum. On my diaries, maybe I want to show 10. On my notepad, maybe I want to show 50. So I can control that by each grid, by each of those drop-down numbers. So each one will be unique, or could be unique. The other thing that I have the ability to do here, and I think most of you know this, is that you've got the ability to print out the grid, as an example. So if I want to print out a listing of my payments, I can dump that into Excel. I can print it to PDF or send it to the printer via PDF. So those are all the options that you have available there. The other option that you have within this grid is you have the ability to pick and choose which column is your primary sort. So for my purposes, when I do a search in here, I want to see things organized chronologically by check date. And I want the latest check to be at the top of the list. So to do that, I need to make sure that I look on my screen here and find which column is being sorted. In this case, it's the transaction type that's being sorted. And I can tell that because there's a little black arrow that shows up here. That tells me as a user that that is the column that's being sorted. But instead, I want to sort by check date. So I'm going to look at the column here. I'm going to circle it. And you'll notice over on the right-hand side of the column of check date, there's these very, very small little gray up and down arrows that are very hard to see. Almost as if there's nothing you can do with them. What you can, in fact, do with them is if you hover over it, you'll see that it turns your cursor into a hand, and you can click this. If I click it twice, the first time I click it, it's going to put them in descending order by date. If I click it one more time, it's going to put them in ascending order by date. So I'll click it twice, and now you'll notice that my latest check, the latest payment here of 11/21, is at the top now. And also this little check date has a down arrow in black. That means that I'm sorting that column in chronological order with the latest value at the top. Once I've selected that, when I navigate out of this claim and I go into a different claim, or I log off the system and come back in tomorrow, that check date will automatically stay in memory for me. So the next time I come in here, that will always be available for me to pick and choose from. So it always remembers the sort that you did. If you change it, if you decide later on you want to sort it by something else and you go out of here, that's going to be your primary sort. So just remember that every time you click any of these column headings, it will try to sort those columns in ascending order by whatever value you selected. So that's just a quick way that if you always want to see your payments in check date order with the latest check at the top, just click that column twice, and that will then put that in the correct date order for you. As I mentioned before, as you're navigating through the claim, you'll see a lot of these grids. As an example, let me go into the diary grid here on this claim. So the same thing. You'll notice that it has this little gear icon. So if you're not using the priority field or the linked field or whatever, you can remove those. You can move the columns up and down and put things in different order. Click save when you're done. You also have the ability to set, as I said before, the maximum number of lines, rows that show up here on diaries. You have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. And then you also have the ability to sort the column. So in this case, again, it's sorted primarily here by diary type. If I want to sort this by due date in ascending order, I'll click this column twice, and now my latest diary will be at the top, and the oldest ones will be at the bottom. So I have that ability to do that with those column settings. So anytime you see a grid in the system, whether it's diary, whether it's the letter screen here where you've got all of your letters listed, all of these have grids. They all have their own controls as to the number of rows, as well as that little gear icon to display. So you have the full flexibility in the system. Notepad is another one that's a popular one to sort. In this case, if you want to sort it by the date added and put them in chronological order with the latest one at the top, you have the ability to do that, as well as move things around within the system here as well by using the little grid control. And each grid control is different for the grids that you're working with. Okay. The next item on the list here is relating to the task screen. So if I go back to my tasks here, you'll notice at the top here that I have a diary calendar, and I also have a little button here that says, it looks like a little toggle switch. If I click it, that takes me over to my litigation calendar. So the benefit of this is that you can have certain things isolated on a separate calendar. So as an example, litigation events are critical to me as a user. I want to know when I have a mediation coming up or a deposition or a trial date. And I want to keep those separate from my normal diaries. And I do that because I want them to kind of stand out. If I've got them all jumbled in, if I go back a month, I think I got a lot of diaries. Here we go. So if they're all jumbled in here with these 5 diaries due on the 29th, they may be missed. So having them on a separate calendar would be a benefit to me. So I have the ability within the claim record. So let's go back into this claim that we were just in. And I have the ability in here to control which of those screens that information shows on. So if I want to put that onto the main diary screen, I'm sure most of you know this, but you'll go into the diary area of the claim, which is the screen we just looked at. You'll click New, and you'll add the diary, and that will then show on the diary screen for you. It'll also show in a different color based on the priority. If, however, I want something on my litigation calendar, I need to make sure that I go into the legal screen to do that. And in the legal screen, there is a section here that's called litigation events. And this is the section that I will use, and I'll circle it here, this area right here. So this is the section that I will use to add in something to my litigation calendar. So just by clicking the Add button, it will give me a checkbox here, and if I click the checkbox that says calendar, that will automatically display on my litigation calendar. So if I go ahead and say, let's say it's a deposition, and the date is February 16th, I'll click Save, and that's going to go ahead and add that now to my litigation calendar. So I'm going to quickly go back here to my tasks. Here's my normal diary screen for February. If I click the litigation button on the 16th now, I will see that legal event, that's a deposition that's been added to the litigation calendar. So using the calendar that's in the legal section of the claim and just adding an event, that will place it on the litigation calendar for me, and I can toggle back and forth. Now, some users like to have everything on one calendar, so in that case, you wouldn't use the litigation calendar. But others who want to separate those items out, it gives you the ability to do that. What's also nice is that when you click on the link that's created, it takes you right into the legal screen of that claim instead of taking you into the main claim summary screen. So it's just a shortcut into the litigation area that you can then go ahead and look at the case number and who the attorneys are and all that other information. So again, that's another user setting that you have within the system. Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit and let's talk about some other settings and configuration options that are more at the administrator level. So if you're not an administrator, this is your time to actually see what they actually do. If you are one, this will also help you kind of showcase some of the features that you may or may not have been aware of that are in the system. So these settings that we'll be talking about now are at whoever your system administrator is, whether it's someone within your office or whether it's someone in IT or what have you. But these are typically controlled because these are global settings. What we've just looked at so far this afternoon have been settings that are at the individual user level. So each user can have their own launchpad, their own way of using diaries, those types of things. So the first thing we're going to talk about in here is, let me go into the main claim detail screen here. So one of the challenges with the system sometimes is that there are a lot of data fields that are captured, that are available for data capture, and that can be good and bad. It's good if you like to have a complete record and you fill a lot of information in, so you have a really good database full of good information from a claim perspective. The downside of that is it becomes very confusing, especially if you hire a new user, as to which fields they're supposed to fill out and which ones they leave blank. So we have added a feature in here that's called Field Resource. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to do three things. The first and most common is it allows you to hide field or a field that you're not using. The second option that you have is you can take a field that maybe you've already been putting data in over the last many years that you don't want to use anymore. But you don't want that data to kind of be removed. You don't want to hide that field because then the data that's under there is hidden as well. But instead you want to just make it a read-only. So maybe this pre-existing disability, I don't use this field anymore for new claims. But for old ones, I still want this to show, but I don't want to give the user the ability to go in here and make a change to this particular field as an example. The other thing that you can do is, let's say that you have a field in here that's required every time a user puts information into the claim screen. You want that to give that to error message that they need to fill that information out before they can save it. So those are the three things that can be done in Field Resource. Again, it's an administrator tool that's in the maintenance section, but what it does is it allows you to go in and tell the system exactly what I just said, which fields you want hidden, which ones if you want to make read-only, or do you want to make a field required. So we have 185 different screens in our system that you can configure. The one I just referred to was the claim detail screen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my little search grid at the top here. I know that's in the work comp area, and I'm just going to type in work comp claim detail, and that's going to show me this screen here. There's also one in here for liability, so just be careful when you're doing this. That's why this is at the administrator level. This is an all or nothing. This isn't the individual user that's doing this. This would be globally for all claims in our system. I'm going to hide this field or make this read only or make this required. So I'm going to highlight the work comp claim detail screen, and at the bottom here you'll notice I have 131 fields that are contained in my claim detail at the work comp level that I have the ability to alter. So the first thing we talked about was the, I think it was the disability date, if you will, pre-existing disability. So I just did a sort here and pulled up this field. So when I click on this little edit icon here, this gives me the ability to do a couple different things. One is if I want to hide this field, I'm not going to use it anymore. I'm going to click the hide button, and that will then remove that from the screen for everybody. Remember I said I have data in here already, so maybe I don't want to hide it, but I want to make it read only. And that all that's going to do is it shows the value, but it won't let me go in and make a change to that value. The other option I have is I can make it required. So if I want that to be filled out each and every time a new claim is entered, I would click required. So just be careful with that, because if you go in and do make a change to the claim that's already been entered and that wasn't required before, it won't let you save whatever you've just done in the claim until you fill that new required field out. So that's, just be careful with that option. The other thing you can do in here is you can change the caption of the field. Now this is good news, bad news. The good news is you can change all the field captions in the system. The bad news is if you want to search by that field or run a report off that field, it's going to be named the existing caption that it came with the system. So I only tell clients to use this if they're sure they're never going to have to search by this field or run a report off this field or use it in a letter, because again it's going to be named what it's named in the database, not what you called it here. Okay, so once you've done all this, you can click save, and then what will happen is it will, in this case, either remove that field from the screen, it will make it read only, or it'll make it required. So you've got those three options in the field resource area. So what's nice about this is that because there's so many screens in here, you have the ability to go down into all different screens. Like you can go into the legal screen, you can go into the notepad screen, you can go into the payment screen, the reserve screen. Any place that has data fields in there, it gives you the option here to go in and hide them, make them required, etc. The other thing I forgot to mention when I was in here is the other option here is what we call hover comment. So this is helpful if you have new users in the system who aren't quite sure what the purpose of this field is used for. So what you can do is you can say, this field should be completed if pre-existing is applicable. And you click save. What happens with that now, if I go back into this claim, and when I hover over that particular field, it will then display that help message for me. So it's basically just a hover comment that's available for different fields within the system that you can then go ahead and turn on or turn off if you prefer. It's helpful, as I said before, for new users who aren't quite sure why are we using this field, or why is this field maybe read only now or something like that. It gives you the ability to put in a little comment that they can view on the screen. Okay, the next item from a global administrator setting is what we refer to as the claim footer. So if you look here, I'm going to circle here at the very bottom left-hand side of your screen. You'll see, in this case, this tells me I'm on the claim detail screen for claim number WC2015, etc. for Jeffrey Nanowski. It's an open claim. That's what the O stands for. FCA tells me which self-insured policy this particular, or what policy this particular claim has been attached to, and then it also shows me the information as to which level of the hierarchy as well. So it gives me quite a bit of information, and of course that screen is dynamic. Every time you change screens within the thing, it'll change it to say notepad or diary or whatever. You have the ability as an administrator to change the settings on that, and that's located in the maintenance area of the system, and it gives you the ability to go in under what we call claim footer, and you can pick and choose in this screen what information displays on the footer. So if you want to add it, I've taken away the examiner name, the date of injury, the policy claim type, the policy description, and the policy type. And I've only left the member, policy number, claim type that you see here. So again, if I want to move things in different order, if I want to put like the name of the insured or the locations up a little higher, I can do that just by moving it. I can remove it. I can add another feature back in if I want to add the examiner name into this to make it easier to identify. So again, I have the controls here that you see in this drop-down list here of availability. Once you're done with that, you click Save, and that will then change the contents of the information that's contained in the footer of each screen that you're in. Another feature that's available, again, from a configuration setting at the administrator level, is the ability to add in what we refer to as additional fields. So we've already talked that the system comes standard with hundreds of different data fields that you can use to capture information. But every once in a while, you'll run across some data that you need to capture based on the types of claims that you're handling, or just some unique information just given the way that you are working with claims, as an example. So we give you the ability to add in what we refer to as additional fields. And if I collapse down my claim detail screen here, you'll notice that I have a section here called additional fields. And this is where I can house those fields that I create. So if I expand this, in my demo database, I have probably about 25 different additional fields that I've added in here. You can see them all listed. They look like regular, normal fields. They're check boxes, they're drop-down lists, they're text fields, date fields, etc. So not only can you create your own fields, but you can also create your own sections. So if I circle here, we're in green here, these are the different groupings of additional fields that I've created. I've got about 5 or 6 here. Anything that you see in purple is considered a category or a group. Underneath each category, I have all of the data fields. So rather than have just a laundry list of all these 50 fields just dumped into the additional fields area here, I put some under additional claim info, some under insured driver, some under NVA, presumptive type, etc. So the system gives me the ability to create not only the fields that I want, but also the different sections or the different categories where these fields will reside. So that function, again, is in the administrator area under additional fields, and that gives you the ability to add additional fields to 54 different screens in our system. So the one I just mentioned that I showed you on that was at the claim level. You can also add them, you can see here, you can add them off the attorney screen, the vehicle screen, the claimant screen, etc. So it's basically just a matter of finding the information that you want. So in this case, I've highlighted this particular screen at the claim level, and here are those fields and categories that I've added. Here's that additional claim info, insured driver, NVA that I just showed you. So under each one of these categories, you just click add and add the category. You can go into the categories here, and that will show you all of the fields that are underneath that individual category. And so here's the fields in here. There's that minor checkbox, et cetera, that I had. So this gives you then the ability to click add and add in your own field. So if I want this to be, date of last contact or something like that, this would actually needs to be in here as a data table name. Apologize for that. This is what the actual user would see, date of last contact. And then I have my data types here. So I can go in here and say that I want this to be a date field. I want it to be a Boolean, which is going to be a checkbox. I want it to be a phone number. It's going to be formatted. I want it to be a select, as an example. What I can do is I can actually create a select dropdown if I want to. So like a code list if I want to. But in this case, I want to make it a date field. And then I can indicate what sequence I want this to be. Do I want it to be the first field, the second field, the third field, etc. When I do that and click save, that will then add that field in for me. and then then I have the ability to, when I go into the additional fields area, to see that new field that's been added as a date field, and then I can start adding values into that field. So that's what the additional fields area is used for from a configuration perspective. The final item on here for today's discussion is those of you that have access to the reports in NAVRISK, the standard report templates that come with the system. Some of you may have access to some of these, some of you may not. Depending upon your deployment, you may have 75 reports, you may have 100. It just depends on how many have been assigned to you. So the last item in here is giving you the ability as the administrator to determine who has access to the report and which reports they have access to and which folder those reports are located in. So by default, under the maintenance area, there's a section called report configuration. And this is where you can go in and create the categories that you want. So these are all the different categories that we have in the system by default. If you want to create your own, you can create your own and call them whatever you want. And then it's a matter of picking and choosing which reports go into which categories. So you can control that functionality. And the final step in here is that you have the ability as an administrator to determine which users have access to which reports. So in this case, it gives me a listing of all my different users in the system. Let's take Susan here as an example. Now, right now, of the 75 reports, she has access to none of these. So if I want to give her access to the adjuster diary report, I'll just click show, maybe the auto pay report, the bank account report, the check register report. I can just click those buttons, and now when she logs in and goes under Vision NAVRISK reports, she will only see these 4 reports that she has access to. So that's a configuration setting that you have within the application as well. So based on what we've talked about today, as you remember, we talked about settings in the system that are available for the individual user, and that related to that launch pad with the tiles that we talked about, the different user settings, the different icon colors that you may want to pick and choose from, what your start page is. We talked about the grid controls where you can go in and all of those different areas in the claim, the diary, the payments, the notes, the letters, etc. You can control what displays there, what order those are in, how they're sorted. The search control, we talked about the different searches and being able to hide fields that you don't use from a search perspective, as well as the diary, the claim diaries versus the legal diaries. And then on the administrative side, the global settings, we talked about field resource, which is the ability to hide fields, make them read-only, etc. The claim footer, the additional fields, and then finally the report configuration. So that concludes our webinar today. If there's any questions, you can use the question function within the tool here, and we'll stay on a little while to address those if there are any. In addition, as I mentioned before, if you do have any follow-up questions, if you want another colleague to be able to view this, or you want to see it again because I totally lost you, you can reach out to Andy and he'll give you information as to the link where this recorded webinar will be located. And that will allow you to be able to access that information. Okay. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I must have done a bang-up job. And with that, I think what we'll do, Andy, unless you have anything else, is we will conclude the webinar.
Can we just add? Can you put the user conference slide back up real quick?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let me do that. Let me pull up my slide deck again here and go back a slide. Let me share that screen. There we go.
Thank you, Jeff. And in case I didn't state it before, the conference is at the Forefront Conference Center in Waltham, Massachusetts, right by our Massachusetts office. So please remember, as far as the user conference, sign up, book as soon as you can. Let us know or come and reach out with me. And we'll definitely make sure that we work with you to make sure that the user conference gives you the most that you can get out of it. And with that, we do thank you for your time. And again, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me at aabella@davidcorp.com or on my phone at 744-8641. Other than that, we hope you have a good day, and we look forward to a few more webinars, and hopefully you'll all join us for the next webinar that we have coming up. And let me get you the date on that. And that is going to be Tuesday, March 27th, and it is NAVRISK Vision KPIs Setup and Implementation. So if you haven't registered for that, please register. And again, thank you, and have yourselves a good rest of your day.